Well, there have been some claims by a number of manufacturers that their rear derailleurs are more aero than other derailleurs, giving the impression that this is going to save you watts and give you some advantage on your bike. Well, is this really the case, and how are they actually putting this evidence forward to substantiate their claims? Well, let's roll that intro and let's have a little bit of a look down that rabbit hole and what is the problems with making these claims. Now, before we jump into derailleurs, we just want to look at what happens when a vehicle, a car or a push bike, it actually hits clean air and what actually happens. Now, when we are moving along in air, the air is fairly still. It is actually moving with the wind and so forth, but let's just say that it's not a windy day, it's very still. As your body and parts hit the wind, you disturb the wind, and then as it comes off the item that's going through the air, it starts to turbulate. Unless the shape of that item is made in such a way that it creates attachment and minimizes the disturbance. But most things aren't of that specific shape, which is a knacker shape, so the air is disturbed. Then you have turbulence that is behind that object as it passes through the air. Now, once that air is turbulated, anything that hits it doesn't take as much energy to move it through the air, because you have swirling winds. It's not like as if it's stationary and you're having to push the volume of air around the object. So now we understand how it works when an object moves through the air. Now we can have a look at a derailleur that's on a bicycle and if it really would make a difference aerodynamically to a bike and reduce your watts. Now, over the years, I've heard a few manufacturers claim things like their derailleurs now, their new model's more aero, or the cage or hanging part of the derailleur is being made more aero, which will give you some aero advantage. Or that's the intent of their statement, to make you believe that this derailleur will actually pass through the air easier. And what they do is they put these derailleurs into an airstream and they say, hey, look, this one disturbs the air less than A or B. So therefore you have a derailleur that's actually going to give you less drag. Now the whole problem with this is when we go back to explaining how an object moves through air, at that point on the bicycle, the air has been disturbed, and it's been disturbed by the front wheel and the spokes. It's hitting the frame, the down tube, then it will hit your foot, your calf, the crankset, the pedal moving around at whatever cadence you're doing. Then there's actually probably some turbulence coming off the back wheel, the chainstay, before it actually gets to that rear derailleur. So once it's got to that point, the air is significantly turbulated, and any change in the design of the derailleur will make zero difference to any drag. And we know this because when we have a triathlon bike, they put the bottles behind the rider on the seat, because we know that has the least effect of drag on the triathlon rider, because the body has already turbulated the air. We also know this because when we're in a peloton, if you're riding behind other riders, they've already broken the air and turbulated it, so you can pass through the air at the same speed using less watts. So this is a phenomenon that we know and has been proven over many, many years. So the whole argument of saying that a derailleur is more aero and putting it into clean air, as some of these tests that they show make them more aero, and they say it's a relative test. Now, I spoke about this in the last video I made, because you can't just look at things in isolation. You need to look at the controls or items that may affect it. Now, the temperature of the day could actually change how much that derailleur causes drag, especially if it's clean air hitting it. And these are the sorts of things you need to test for and you need to allow. Now, when there's a bike and a rider and a front wheel and everything in front of this derailleur, that is a control. That affects the results of what that derailleur is doing as it's moving into the air. So you can't ignore it. You can't say, oh, we're comparing A derailleur with B derailleur like some manufacturers do and test it in isolation because, I mean, some people call it real world, but what it is you're ignoring any controls that can have an effect on that derailleur aerodynamically. So when I hear things like this, my BS meter, like the volume goes up to 11 because you just go, hang on a sec. It's like putting a drink bottle and mounting it upright on the front of the handlebars and then saying it's the same as if you put the bottle behind you and saying, oh, but we're testing different bottles, it's relative, you know, like we're testing a Camelback against an Elite bottle. You can't test them, you have to test them where they're being used on the bike because depending on where they're mounted on the bike, the aerodynamic drag will be different. Well, anyway, guys, I just wanted to call out some of the examples and tests they're using in the bicycle industry, and aerodynamics of a derailleur is really an outstanding one, and it's really quite outrageous to me that they're willing to even put these tests up on their page and make these claims. Well, anyway, guys, that's where I'm going to leave it, and I will see you next vid. Cheers.